Hi, if we are preparing for AWS Certified Solution Architect exam, then this video is for you. In this video, we are going to do a mock test, which would be roughly 65 questions, which we need to solve in 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's the exact pattern of what will come in the real certification exam for AWS Certified Solution Architect. Here is the syllabus and we will start it soon. So I am going to share the important questions which might appear in the exam. So let's get started. Please hit a like on my channel and subscribe it and share it with your friends. So what's the first question? Here we see we have 65 question. I am going to solve it and you can leave the comment if you think that the answer might be something else what I pick here from that. So it will be more collaborative that way. And at the end, we will review the results and whatever are the incorrect answers or what we mark for review at the later, we look at them. So here goes question first. A new startup is considering the advantages of using DynamoDB versus a traditional relational database in AWS RDS. The NoSQL nature of DynamoDB presents a small learning curve to the team members who have experience with traditional database. The company will have multiple databases and the decision will be made on the case-by-case basis. Which of the following use case would favor DynamoDB? Select 2. A strong referential integrity system between table. This is not even possible in DynamoDB. Storing blob data, storing infrequent access data. Actually, DynamoDB is meant for a lot of concurrency. So managing web session data. This is a very good use case. And storing metadata for S3 objects. This can also be a very good use case. Still, we'll mark it for review because they are saying you have to store some binary data, which is typically not the use case. DynamoDB is a key value pair storage, provide a serverless offering by AWS. So second question, several instances you are creating have a specific data requirement. The requirement states that the data on the root device needs to be persisted independently from the lifetime of the instance after creating the AWS storage options. After considering AWS storage options, which is the simplest way to meet these requirements? So they are saying that several instances of your you are creating have a specific data requirement. The requirement states that the data on the root device needs to persist independently from the life cycle of the instance. So send the data to S3 using S3 lifecycle rules. I don't think this can happen. But yeah, storing in S3 is also a good idea. Store the data on the local instance storage. Create a cron job to migrate the data to S3. Store your root data device on AWS EBS and set the delete on termination attribute false using the block device mapping. Because in S3 it is not a block storage. If you have a object you can save it, but once you update it you have to replace that entire object. So that entire process is not very fast and smooth. But if you go with EBS, then it is closer to the instance, it is block storage, so update can happen. And that would be the most fast, efficient, and cost-effective way for this scenario. You have configured a VPC with both a public and a private subnet. You need to deploy a web server and a database. You want the web server to be accessed from the internet by customers, which is the proper configuration for this architecture. Web server outside of VPN for internet access, database in private subnet. This is not even possible that you can keep anything outside VPC, which is virtual private cloud. Second option, web server in public subnet and data in private. This I think is the good answer, but we'll read another as well options. Both web server and database in public subnet If you put database, you don't have to expose database by keeping it in public subnet. So that's not a right answer. A database outside the VPC for decoupling from web servers and web server in public subnet for internet access. Question number 4. You are managing S3 buckets in your organization. The management of S3 extends to Amazon Glacier. For auditing purpose, you would like to be informed if an object restored to S3 from Glacier. What is the most effective way you can do this? Create CloudWatch event for uploading to S3. Create an SNS notification for any upload to S3. Configure S3 notification for restore operation from Glacier. Create a Lambda function which is triggered by restoration of object from Glacier to S3. So again, read the question. You are managing S3 bucket in your organization. The management of S3 extends to the Amazon Glacier. For auditing purpose, you would like to be informed if an object is restored. So whenever there is an object which is restored, uh, you have to do it in cost effective way. So this could be the one when you have Lambda function which is triggered by restoration of an object from Glacier. So Glacier can trigger the Lambda function, uh, because Lambda function can be triggered by S3 and the life cycle as well. This is most appropriate answer. Configure S3 notification for restore operation from Glacier. I'm not sure how S3 notification will send you, because there is another service which is SNS, which is here, right? So create an SNS notification for any upload to S3. We don't want any upload, we want the restoration use case, which is this use case. Create a CloudWatch event for upload to S3. So A and B are not good, D and C are close. C, S3 notification for restore operation from Glacier. So if this can be done, if you can have S3 notification for restoration operation from Glacier in the life cycle or some process, this is good. Otherwise, manually you could do that. So I'll go still with D and we'll mark it. We'll see it at the end. Question 5. You work for a defense contracting company. The company develops software applications which perform intensive calculation in the area of mechanical engineering related to metals for shipbuilding. The company competes for and wins contracts that typically range from 1 year to 5 years. These long-term contract means that the duration of your need for EC2 instance can be matched to the length of the contract and then extended if necessary. The main requirement is consistent performance for the duration of the contract. Which EC2 purchase option provide the best value given these long-term contract? This question should be just one liner. Which purchase option for long-term is good, and you would have always do reserved, because you already know. But then they are also saying that if it is defense, so you could always go with the dedicated host, but they haven't told anything related to security. They are just saying that it should be long-term contract, and so we can match it with the reserve instance. You are designing an architecture for a financial company which provides a data trading application to customers. After viewing the traffic patterns for the existing application, you notice that traffic is fairly steady throughout the day, with the exception of large spikes at the opening of the market in the morning and at closing around 3 p.m. Your architecture will include an auto-scaling group of EC2 instances. How can you configure the auto scaling group to ensure that system performance meet the increased demand at opening and closing? Okay. So this is fairly they are asking about how you can bear the load by doing auto ASG, auto scaling groups. So configure your ASG to have a desired size which will be able to meet the demand of the high traffic price. Configure dynamic scaling policy to scale based on CPU utilization. Yeah, this is also good option. Use a load balancer to ensure that the load is distributed evenly during high traffic period. That would always be the case anyway. There would be a load balancer for sure. Use a predictive scaling policy on the auto scaling group to meet opening and closing spikes. There are no closing. Are there any closing spikes? This could also be a very good option because you are doing predictive scaling policy on auto scaling group to meet opening and closing. So let's see, with the exception of large spikes at the opening of the market in the morning and closing at 3 p.m. So because if you would do based on the CPU utilization, you might miss the bus, which means that by the time this is called a cold start, by the time you will hit 80% utilization, another stance would take time, for example, 3 to 5 minutes to become serviceable. So those customers might get impacted. If you have predictive scaling, which means that before the the spike arrives, it is already there, ready to respond. So instead of reactive, this would be responsive. A consultant is hired by a small company to configure an AWS environment. The consultant brings working with the VPC and launching EC2 instances within the VPC. The consultant begins working with the VPC and launching EC2 instances within the VPC. The initial instances will be placed in a public subnet. The consultant begins to create security groups. What is true of the default security group? You can delete this group, however, you cannot change the group rules. That's false. You can delete this group and you can change the group's rule. Yes, that is true. You cannot delete this group. You cannot delete this group, however, you can change the group rules. So we got our answer. The company you work for has reshuffled teams a bit and you have been moved from the AWS IAM team to AWS network team. One of your first assignment is to review the subnets in the main VPC. What are two key concepts regarding subnets? A subnet spans all availability zone. No, that is VDC, not subnet. Each subnet is associated with one security group. You can have multiple security groups on a actually security group is for instance. For subnet you have network ACLs. Private subnet can only hold database, not true. Each subnet maps to a single availability zone. This is true. Every subnet you create associate with the main route table for the VPC. So multiple answers, and what are those, right? Each subnet you create is associated with the main route table for the VPC. Yes, that is true. Private subnet can only hold databases, not true. Each subnet is associated with one security group, not true. Okay, we got our answer. After an IT steering committee meeting, you have been put in charge of configuring a hybrid environment for the company's compute resources. You weigh, you weigh the pros and cons of various technologies such as VPN and Direct Connect. And based on the requirements, you have decided to configure a VPN connection. What features and advantages can a VPN connection provide? So we have to weigh the pros and cons of different technologies such as VPN and direct connect. So let's see. It provides it provides a private dedicated network connection between an on-premise network and the VPC. Yeah, that is true. It provides a cost-effective and private network connection that bypass the internet. Direct connect, VPN direct connect, yes, it bypass the internet. No, actually it doesn't bypass the, it's a private connection. Let's see again. It provides the network connection between two VPCs that can route traffic using IPv4 6. It provides a connection between a on-premise network and a VPC using a secure and private connection with IPsec and TLS. This is the right answer actually, because it provides a connection between on-premise and VPC using a secure private connection. That is what is VPC direct, but I am not sure if it holds a dedicated line, because VPC direct is dedicated line bypassing the internet. Let's go with B for now. You have been evaluating the NACLs in your company. Most of the NACLs are configured the way you have the 100 rule, then 200, then all. So first priority is given to the 100, and then 200 is deny, and then star all traffic deny. So this rule would take the precedence. Okay, what function does star all traffic deny rule perform? The star specify that is an example rule. I hope so. Traffic will be denied from specific IPs. The rule ensures that if a packet doesn't match any of the other numbered rules, it's denied. Yes. It is there in case no other rules are defined. No. So what happened is, one by one it would go with the rule. So the rule with the lower number is evaluated first, and then another rule. So this rule will take the priority, but if something which doesn't goes in the priority of the above, it would fall back into the last one. This is what I believe, but it would be a good learning. We'll look at the end. So star specify its example rule, not really. It specifies if it doesn't get any match, then the star rule would be considered. Your team has provisioned multiple auto scaling group in a single availability zone. The ASG at max capacity would total 40 EC2 instances between them. However, you notice that the ASG will only scale out to total 20 instances at any one time. What could be the problem? So max capacity total is 40 EC2s in the auto scaling group. But you notice that ASG will only scale out to a total of 20. Why? There is a virtual CPU based on demand instance per limit per region. You can only have 20 instances per availability zone. You can only have 20 instances per region. That is a hard limit. The associated load balancer can only serve 20 instances at one time. Tough, huh? So there is a auto scaling group, and in the question they have not talked about load balancer, but you can assume that if there is a load balancer. If there is not a load balancer, then so we could think of two options. First is 20 instances per availability zone could be the max limit, which can of course be updated. In a single availability zone, you can have 20. So if that is the limit, then we'll go with this because the associated load balancer can serve 20 instances. I don't think because there are so many websites which are taking crazy traffics. So it should be more. Your company has recently converted to a hybrid cloud environment and will slowly be migrating to a fully AWS cloud environment. The AWS side is in need of some steps to prepare for a disaster recovery. A disaster recovery plan needs draw up a disaster recovery drills need to be performed. The company wants to establish recovery time and recovery point objective with a major component being cost. You have determined and will recommend that the best disaster recovery config to meet cost and RTO RPO objectives will be to have a minimal version of the application always running in another region, which AWS disaster recovery plan pattern will meet these requirement. Pilot light, warm standby, multi-site, backup and restore. I say warm standby. Why? Because you have a minimal app always running on the other side. So if there is any issue, you can always switch it. So your company has recently converted a hybrid cloud and will slowly be migrated to a fully AWS. The AWS side is in need of some step to prepare for disaster recovery. The disaster recovery plan needs drawn and disaster recovery drills need to be performed. The company want to establish recovery time and recovery point objectives with a major component being cost. You have determined and will recommend that the best DR config to meet cost and RTO RPO objective will be to have a minimal version of the application always running in another zone. So we are not doing a backup or restore. We are not doing a pilot light. We can say warm standby. A software company, a software gaming company has produced an online racing game which uses CloudFront for fast delivery to worldwide users. The game also uses DynamoDB for storing in-game and historical user data. The DynamoDB table has a pre-configured read and write capacity. User has been reporting slow down issues and an analysis has revealed that the DynamoDB table has begun throttling during peak traffic times. Which step can you take to improve game performance? Add load balancer in front of web server? No, because sometime your web server is performing well, and if database is the bottleneck, it doesn't matter how big your front end or the load balancer part could be. Add elastic cache to cache frequently accessed data in memory. Add SQSQ to queue request which can be lost. Make sure DynamoDB auto scaling is turned on. This is the correct answer. So there is a read and write capacity unit which is by default 5 requests per second. 5 actually, 5 unit, 5 CPU they say. And RCU, read capacity unit, and write capacity unit, WCUs. So once you make it auto scaling or on demand, then it would be able to bear the load easily. Your company has recently converted to a hybrid cloud environment and will slowly be migrating to a fully AWS cloud environment. The AWS side is in need of some steps to prepare for disaster recovery. A disaster recovery plan needs drawn up and disaster recovery drill needs to be performed. The company wants to establish recovery time and recovery point objectives, with a major component being a very aggressive RTO. What is RTO? Return I'm recovery time objective. Okay. With cost not being a major factor, you have determined and will recommend that the best disaster recovery configuration to meet cost and RPO objective will be to run a second AWS architecture in another region in an active configuration, which AWS disaster recovery pattern will best meet this requirement. Backup and restore, multi-site, warm standby, pilot light. So I am confused. Last time we picked warm standby because it was running with a for standby. Here we could do, actually last one could be pilot light and this could be warm standby. Multi-site can also be, but this is not accepting any traffic, I believe. Let's reread the question. Okay, so since this is not active passive, this is active, I would go with multi-site. We might think it could be wrong, but let's see at the end. Because active passive, what happens is one is active and second is standby. But here they are doing both regions as active. So if there is disaster, at least one region would be able to serve. This is what I assume. We'll review it at the end. A gaming company is creating an application which is simply providing a leaderboard for the specific games. The leaderboard would use DynamoDB for data and simply needs to be updated in near real time. An EC2 instance will be configured to house the application, which will be accessed by subs subscribers from the internet, which step is not necessary for internet traffic to flow to and from the internet. So we have done about 15, there is 65, 50 more questions and we have 100 minutes. We have 2 minutes per question, which is good time, not a problem. So a gaming company is creating an application which simply provides a leaderboard for specific game. The leaderboard would use DynamoDB and simply needs to be updated in real time. An EC2 instance will be configured to house the application, which will be accessed by subscriber from the internet, which step is not necessary for internet traffic to flow to and from the internet. Attach internet gateway to your VPC. Add route to your subnet route table that directs internet bound traffic to the internet. A route in the route table to DynamoDB table. Ensure that your network access control list and security group rules allow the relevant traffic to flow to and from the instance. So all the three options are needed, but not because DynamoDB is a serverless application and you don't have specific IP which you can add to the route table. So I guess this would be the answer. Your company is slowly migrating to a cloud and is currently in a hybrid environment. The server team has been using Puppet for deployment automations. The decision has been made to continue using Puppet and AWS environment if possible. If possible, which AWS service provide integration with Puppet? It is not possible. The AWS developer tool suite has can handle automations, Elastic Beanstalk, AWS OpsWork, Cloud Formation. So there are a couple of things. It could be AWS OpsWork or these two, because Beanstalk is for web applications and Cloud Formation is a template infrastructure as code. This is not possible. The AWS developer tool suite can handle automation. Yeah, this is more likely to be the right answer, because developer, they have their own pipeline and they have their own tools. Having said that, I guess AWS OpsWork would also leverage or can allow Puppet to work in here in some ways, because that is a hybrid thing. After several issues with your application and unplanned downtime, your recommendation to migrate your application to AWS is approved. You have set up high availability on the front end and a load balancer and a auto scaling group. What step can you take with your database to configure high availability and ensure minimal downtime use under 5 minutes? Create a read replica, ensure multi-AZ failover on the database. Take frequent snapshots of your database, create your database using CloudFormation and save template for reuse. I would go with multi-AZ because they are saying you need high availability and within 5 minutes. A car insurance company keeps specific details about accidents on file for a year for quick retrieval and then archives those files to long-term storage. A recent audit has proved that the general steps they are taking, but pointed out many deficiencies in the technologies they are using. You have been hired as a consultant to come up with an automated solution. Your solution will recommend AWS storage options. What storage option could you recommend to meet the lifecycle requirement outlined, providing high availability and offer the most saving? Store the accident file in EBS volume for a year, then migrate them to Glacier. Configure the lifecycle policy to store the accident file in S3 for a year and then archive them in Glacier. This seems more appropriate. Store the accident file in Glacier. Store the accident file in S3 for a year, then have the lifecycle policy move them to S3 IA. So IA would be infrequent access and Glacier would be something more costly. So we'll go with that. Your company security team has planned to do penetration testing on EC2 instances. Which policy will provide information on performing penetration testing on your EC2 instance? AWS terms and condition, JSON policy, IAM policy, customer service policy for penetration testing. A team of architects is designing a new AWS environment for a company which wants to migrate to cloud. The architects are considering the use of EC2 instance with instance store volumes. The architect realized that the data on the instance storage volume are ephemeral, means temporary. The architects realized that the data on the instance store volumes are ephemeral, which action will not cause the data to be deleted on an instance store volume. Reboot, the underlying disk drive fails, hardware disk drive failure, instance is stopped. So when you will reboot, the instance state underlying disk failure, it will be gone. Hardware failure will be gone. Between instances stopped and instances rebooted means restarted, one among these two. So when instances stop and start, uh, reboot. So there is hibernate, stop. Uh, let's check. Sorry, I'm doing which is bad. So if we have instances, I guess there are several ways. Uh, let's go with instances stop, because when it is hibernated, it will come back as is without deleting the data. Terminated and stopped are different things, so please remember that. A small startup company has begun using AWS for all of its IT infrastructure. The company has two AWS solutions architect, and they are very proficient with AWS deployments. They want to choose a deployment service that best meets their given requirements. Those requirements include version control and their infrastructure documentation and granular control of all the services to be deployed. Which AWS service would be best? So Terraform is not a AWS service. Cloud formation, you have to give Beanstalk. So ops work would be the best. A financial institution is preparing for an upcoming audit. You have been placed in charge of preparing for this audit. One of the requests made by the auditors is to see documentation on all activity made on your account. Which AWS service would you use to meet the requirement? CloudTrail. You are evaluating a security setting with the main company VPC. There are several network ACL and security group to evaluate the possibly audit or edit, I don't know, possibly added. What is true regarding the network ACL and security group? Network ACL and security group are both stateful. Network ACL and uh, are stateless, and security group are stateful. You are working for a large financial institution and preparing for a disaster recovery and upcoming disaster recovery drill. A key component in the DR plan will be the MySQL database instances and their data. The recovery time objective is such that the read replica can be used to offload read traffic from the master database. Which item are the key feature of read replica? You can create a read replica within availability zone, cross availability zone, or cross region. Yeah, I think this can happen. A read replica can be manually promoted as a standalone database instance. 100% sure this can be done. You have up to 5 read replicas per master, each with its own DNS endpoint. Synchronous replication. When a problem is detected in the primary instance, it will automatically fail over to the read replica. But then read replica will take over or something, because here you're talking about disaster recovery and you have the read replica. So either you have to manually promote it, or once there is a failover, it can go and make the read replica to write on that as well. Sorry, I'm doing because I'm nervous and I can't think, so I use filler sound like sorry about that. Synchronous replication, this should happen. Synchronous means once you put data in one, uh, that will replicate. That should not happen because it has to be asynchronous. You can have up to 5 read replica per master, each with its own DNS endpoint. This could be a limit. We'll see, we'll learn at the end. A company is running a teaching application which is consumed by users. Guys, I want to tell you there is one liner question, but in this exam, they try to make it complicated by telling a lot of stories which consume our time as well. So the point here, as an architect, there will be some cases, real-time cases, when you hear to the real customers. That is where they have stories and solution, or the problem statement is probably just one line. That is why the exam is designed in such a way. A company is running teaching application which is consumed by user all over the world. The application is translated into 5 different languages. All of these language file need to be stored somewhere that is highly durable and can be accessed frequently. As content is added to the site, the storage demand will grow by factor of 5. So the storage uh, must be highly scalable as well. Which storage option will be highly durable, cost effective, and highly scalable? So this is a one liner thing. Which storage option is highly durable, highly cost effective, and highly scalable? And answer is this simple, S3. Wait a moment. They did not say high availability. So durable, cost effective, and scalable. And they have given Glacier. So EBC instance, RDS is expensive. Glacier would be one. Since you are running this application in 5 different languages, you need to store high durable, can be accessed frequently. S3. Yeah, simple. You work for an online retailer where any downtime at all can cause a significant loss of revenue. You have architected your application to be deployed on an auto scaling group of EC2 instances behind the load balancer. You have configured and deployed these resources using a CloudFormation template. The auto scaling group is configured with default settings and simple CPU utilization scaling policy. You have also set up multiple availability zones for high availability. The load balancer does health check against an HTML file generated by script. When you begin performing load testing on your application and notice in CloudWatch that the load balancer is not sending traffic to one of the EC2 instances, what could be the problem? The EC2 instance has failed the load balancer health check. Yes. The instance has not been registered. The EC2 instance has failed EC2 status check. You are load testing at a moderate traffic level and not all instances are needed. So that is not the case because load balancer's responsibility is to distribute almost, it depends on the policy, but to distribute the load evenly across all. So it will not send the load once the health check fails. Your development team has created a gaming uh, application that uses DynamoDB to store user statistics and provide fast game updates back to user. The team has begun testing the application but needs a consistent data set to perform test with. The testing process alters the data set, so the baseline data needs to be retrieved upon each new test. Which AWS service can meet this need by exporting data from DynamoDB and importing data into DynamoDB? AWS import export, Elastic MapReduce, Redshift, or DAX. DAX is a DynamoDB accelerator, which is a caching. Your development team has changed the gaming application that uses DynamoDB to store static and provide fast game updates back to user. The team has begun testing the application but needs a consistent data set to perform tests with. The testing process alters the data set, so the baseline data needs to be retrieved upon each new test. Which AWS service can meet this need by exporting data from DynamoDB and importing back? Okay, I got the problem, and probably there is AWS import export service because the baseline data is getting changed. That is why uh, you might need AWS service. You are working as a solution architect in a large healthcare, bless me, organization. You have many ASG that utilize launch configuration. Many of these launch configuration are similar yet have subtle difference. You would like to use multiple versions of these launch config. An ideal approach would be to have default launch config and then have additional versions that add additional feature. Which option best meets these requirements? Create the launch config in CloudFormation and version the temporary templates accordingly. Use launch config template instead. Store the launch configuration in S3 and turn on versioning. Simply create the needed version. Launch config already have versioning. So launch config has versioning. I have used that. And I have also created the versions. You are about to configure two EC2 instances in your VPC. The instances will be in different subnets but in the same availability zone. The first instance will house the main company website and will need to be able to communicate with the database that will be housed on the second instance. What steps can you take to make sure the instance will be able to communicate properly? So you are about to configure two EC2 instances in your VPC. The instance will be in different subnets but in same availability zone. The first instance will house the main company website and will be able to communicate with the database that will be housed on the second instance. What step can you take to make sure that the instance will be able to communicate properly? Choose to put the instance in the same placement group. Make sure each instance has an elastic IP not needed. Make sure all security group allow communication between the app and the database on the correct port using the proper protocol. Yeah, this you can do. You should do. Make sure network ACLs allow communication between two subnets. Yeah, this also makes sense. Configure virtual private gateway not needed. Make sure each instance not needed. Put the instance in the same placement group. That is not required. Basically, if you have two different subnets, you can put them in same placement group as well so that they are, but that is not needed. These two things are necessary. So we have 85 minutes and we have 35 questions. So we are still on time. 35 multiplied by 2 is 70. So we'll finish 15 minutes early probably with this speed. A professional baseball league has chosen to use a key value and document database for storage, processing, and data delivery. Many of the data requirements involving high speed processing of a data such as Doppler radar system, which samples the position of the baseball 2000 times per second, which AWS data storage can meet these requirements. Whenever you hear key value, just blindly pick DynamoDB and move ahead. Your company has performed a disaster recovery drill which fails to meet the recovery time objective desired by executive management. The failure was due to large part by the amount of time taken to restore proper functioning on the database side. You have given management a recommendation of implementing synchronous data replication for the RDS database to help meet the RTO. Let me read. You have given management a recommendation of implementing synchronous data replication for the RDS database to help meet the RTO, recovery time objective. Which of these options can perform synchronous data replication RDS? I think multi-zone AZ will help in this case. Read replica is also good. AWS database migration will just do the migration. DAX is DynamoDB accelerator. Between these two, one should be the option. But I lean more on this because that is where the replication would happen in multi-AZ. An international travel company has an application which provides travel information and alerts to users all over the world. The application is hosted on group of EC2 instances in auto-scaling group in multiple AWS regions. There are also load balancers routing traffic to these instances. In two countries, Ireland and Australia, there are compliance rules in place that dictate users connect to the application in EU West 1 and AP Southeast 1. Which service can you use to meet these requirements? So what is the compliance again? In two countries, there are compliant rules in place that dictate user connect to applications. Okay. Use Route 53 geolocation routing. Simple. And configure load balancer to route user to the proper region. Is it single answer? Yes. So then you don't have to do anything. Based on this, it would take care. Configure cloud formation, not needed. And based on the route, things would go. Load balancer, load balancer. Load balancer also has routing capabilities, just like Route 53, but it routes based on the health. Oh, it cannot change the region of this. So that is not a solution. It can it can do within a region. No, actually, load balancer can also do across region in some of the cases to some of the instances. But yeah, we picked the answer. Let's move on. We are halfway done almost. We have been tasked to review your company disaster recovery plan due to some new requirement. The driving factor is that the recovery time objective has been very aggressive. Because of this, it has been decided to configure multi-AG deployment for the RDS MySQL database. Unrelated to DR, it has been determined that some read traffic needs to be offloaded from the master database. What step can be taken to meet this requirement? So they are also saying that you have unrelated to disaster recovery, it has been determined that some read traffic needs to be offloaded from the master. What steps would you take? So convert Aurora to allow the standby to serve read traffic. You could do that because this is MySQL, and MySQL and Postgres support this. Redirect some of the read traffic to standby database, add DAX, add read replica to offload some read traffic. But it would not do disaster recovery. And our main goal is to do disaster recovery. And then disaster recovery time objective is very aggressive. So I'll go with Aurora. Convert to Aurora to allow the standby to serve read traffic. So what would happen? You can use it as read, and if the primary fails, the Aurora can act as primary. You can promote it. An organization of about 100 employee has performed the initial setup of users in IAM. All users except administrators have the same basic privilege, but now it has been determined that 50 employees will have extra restrictions on EC2. They will be unable to launch new instances or alter the state of existing instance. What will be the quickest way to implement these restrictions? Create an IAM role to the restrictions, attach it to the EC2 instance. So you are creating a role, but attaching it to EC2 instance might or might not work. Create an appropriate policy, place the restricted user in the new policy. Create the appropriate policy with only 20 users attached to the policy. Create appropriate policy, create new group for restricted user. Place the restricted user in the new group and attach the policy to the group. The CFO of your company approaches you and inquire about cutting cost in your AWS account. One area you are able to identify for cost cutting is in S3. There is data in S3 that is very rarely used and has only been retained for audit purpose. You decide to achieve this data to a cheaper storage solution. Which solution would meet the requirement? Use lifecycle policy to archive the data to Glacier. A data company has implemented a subscription service for storing video files. There are two level of subscriptions, personal and professional. The professional user can upload a total of 5 GB of data, and professional user can upload 5 TB of data. The application can handle file up to 1 TB to an S3 bucket. What is the best way to upload file of this size? Multi-part upload. So what happen is 5 GB you can divide it in 1 TB different parts. So that can be done. And S3 allows multi-part upload. Your architecture consists of an application load balancer front, an auto scaling group of EC2 instance backed by RDS database. Your security team has notified you of cross-site scripting attacks and also SQL injection attacks on the application. You have been asked to take steps to quickly mitigate these attacks. What you would do, immediately block the offering offending IP address in the knuckles. Yes, you should do this. But they are saying cross-site scripting attacks. And then use the AWS WAF service, set up the rule to block SQL injections and cross-site scripting attack, associate the rule to application load balancer. This is more appropriate. Confirm Amazon Guard Duty to prevent these attacks. Configure, and use Amazon Inspector to detect these attack and manually block the IP address from which these attacks come. Look, there are two things. First is SQL injection, and second is cross-site scripting XSS. And for these, the best pollution, not pollution, solution is AWS Web Application Firewall, WAF. An application load balancer is fronting an ASG of EC2, and the instance are backed by an RDS database. The auto scaling group has been configured to use the default termination policy. You are testing the ASG and have triggered a scale in which instance will be terminated first. So you are testing the ASG and have triggered a scale in which instance will be terminated first. One with the least traffic. Let's see the options. The ASG will randomly select an instance, the instance for which the load balancer stops sending traffic. The instance launches from the oldest launch config, the longest running instance. The instance which stops sending traffic or which is low traffic. You have been assigned to create an architecture which uses load balancer to direct traffic to an ASG of EC2 across multiple availability zone. The application to be deployed on these instances is a life insurance application which requires path-based and host-based routing. Which of the load balancer will you need? It will be application because network load balancer work on layer 4, which is mainly not very intelligent routing. If you have path-based routing, which means the path param, then you must go with the application load balancer. A testing team is using a group of EC2 instances to run batch. Automated tests uh, are tossed on an application. The tests run overnight but don't take all night. The instance sit idle for long period for the time and accrue unnecessary charges. What can you do to stop these instances when they are ideal for long period? Write a cron job which query the instance status. Also write a lambda function which can be triggered upon a certain status and stop the instance. You can create a CloudWatch alarm that is triggered when the average CPU utilization percentage has been lower than 10% for 4 hours and stop the instance. Write a cron job which query the instance state. If certain status is met, have the cron job kick off cloud formation to terminate the existing instance and create a new instance from a template. Write Python script which query the instance status. Also write a lambda function which can be triggered upon a certain status and stop the instance. I think most smart way is go with CloudWatch alarm that is triggered when the average CPU utilization percent is lower than 10% for 4 hours. But 4 hour is a long time, so I don't think it should be 4 hours, but we can take the risk. You could do cron job, both these seems good. You can always use cloud formation as well, but the best way is CloudWatch. But what would you do with the CloudWatch? You should have a lambda function. So here write a cron job that queries the instance status. Also write a lambda function which can be triggered upon a certain status and stop the instance. So this will be more appropriate. Now we have 25 questions and 68 minutes. A small startup company has begun using AWS for its first IT infrastructure. The company has one solutions architect like me, and the demands for their time and overwhelming. For their time are overwhelming. The software team has been given permission to deploy their Python and PHP application on their own. They would like to deploy these applications without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. Which AWS service would they use for the deployment? So I would go with Elastic Beanstalk because the learning curve is really small and they don't want to worry about the underlying infrastructure. And Python and PHP is a web application, and Elastic Beanstalk supports both of these. Your company needs to deploy an application in the company AWS account. The application will reside on EC2 instance in an auto-scaling group fronted by an application load balancer. The company has been using Elastic Beanstalk to deploy all the application due to limited AWS experience within the organization. The application now needs upgrades and a small team of subcontractors have been hired to perform these upgrades. Which web service can be used to provide users that you authenticate with short-term security credential that can control access to your AWS resource? So you have contractors to do something the company has been using, blah blah. The application now needs upgrade and small team of subcontractor. Which web service can be used to provide user that you authenticate with short-term security credential that can control the access? So STS is a security token. It provides short-term access, but then SSO provides single sign-on. And federated login. IAM group is again something you can create the group and you can add those subcontractors, uh, and you will remove it. And IAM user accounts. So not sure, but STS, I am not even sure how can I provide them the short-term credential STS token. AWS Security Token Service. Your design and architecture, which will house an auto-scaling group of EC2 instances. The application hosted on the instance is expected to be an extremely popular social networking site. Forecast for traffic to the site, expect very high traffic, and you will need a load balancer to handle tens of millions of requests per second while tens and millions of requests per second while maintaining high throughput at ultra low latency. You need to select the type of load balancer to front your auto scaling group to meet this high traffic requirement. Which load balancer will you select? All AWS load balancer meet the requirement and perform the same. You will need application load balancer to meet this requirement. You will need a network load balancer to meet this requirement because you need ultra low latency. Social networking site. It is a web application. So it could be the network load balancing and application. But because of low latency, we would go with this. You have been assigned to create an architecture which uses load balancer to direct traffic to an ASG of EC2 instances across multiple availability zones. You were considering using an application load balancer, but some of the requirements you have been given seem to point to a classic load balancer. Which requirement would you be better served by application load balancer, path-based routing, and support for sticky session using application generated cookies? I would go with path-based routing because I'm not sure if that is there in class environment. Support for sticky session using application generated cookies. You have been assigned to migrate an application and the servers it runs onto the company AWS cloud environment. You have created a checklist of steps necessary to perform this migration. A subsection in the checklist is security consideration. One of the things that you need to consider is the shared responsibility module. Which option does the customer handle under the shared responsibility model? So there is a spelling mistake, model and module in this. Availability zone, network infrastructure. So what is customer's responsibility? Identity and access management is customer's responsibility. A company has a great deal of data in S3 bucket for which they want to create a database. Creating the RDS database, normalizing the data, and migrating to RDS database will take time and is the long term plan. But there is an immediate need to query this data to retrieve information necessary for an audit. Which AWS service will enable querying data in S3 with standard SQL commands? Ethna. The application's questions are very easy once you know it. You are consulting for a state agency focused on state lottery. You have been given a task to have 2 million barcodes created as quickly as possible. This will require EC2 instances and an average CPU utilization of 70% for each of them. So you plan to spin up 10 EC2 instances to create the barcodes. You estimate that the instances will complete the job from around 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. You don't want the instances sitting idle for up to 9 hours until the next morning. What can you do to terminate these instances when they are done? Write a Python script which query the instance status. Also write a lambda function which can be triggered upon a certain state and terminate the instance. Write a cron job which query the instance state. If a certain status is met, have the cron job kick off cloud formation to terminate the existing instance and create new instance from a template. This same as before. You can create a cloud watch alarm and then write a cron job which queries the instance status. Also write a lambda function which can be triggered upon a certain status. So what do you guys suggest? We should go with the CloudWatch or we should go with the script which can invoke Lambda? Because CloudWatch function is to generate the alerts, but based on the alert, action needs to be taken. And which thing would take the action is Lambda. And we are talking about the CPU utilization, not the instance status. So we can go with this time. But I am completely not sure that once the CloudWatch trigger the alarm and terminate the instance. Let's go with this. But it would waste a lot of money because it is sitting 9 hours. So still if utilization is less than 4 hours, like if it is consistently less than 10% for 4 hours, then we are killing it. So, but immediately killing is also not a solution. So this might be a better one. Your company has gone through an audit with a focus on data storage. You are currently storing historical data in Amazon Glacier. One of the result of audit is that a portion of the infrequently accessed historical data must be able to be accessed immediately upon the request. Which can you store this data to meet the requirement? Portion of the infrequently accessed historical data must be available to be accessed immediately. You have a typical architecture of an application load balancer fronting an auto scaling group of EC2 instances backed by the RDS MySQL database. Your application load balancer is performing health check on EC2 instances. What actions will be taken if an instance fails these health check? The ALB stops sending traffic to instance, as simple as that. You are managing data storage for your company, and there are many EBS volumes. Your management team has given you some new requirements. Certain metrics on the EBS volumes need to be monitored, and the database team needs to be notified by email when certain metric thresholds are exceeded, which AWS service can be configured to meet. So you're managing data storage for a company. There are many EBS volumes. Your management team has given some new requirements. Some metrics on EBS volumes need to be monitored, and the database team needs to be notified by email when a certain metrics threshold okay. So you can do SNS for notification service and CloudWatch for watching. So we'll watch the EBS. Once the storage or anything goes, it would generate the alarm. Based on the alarm, SNS would take over. A travel company has deployed a website which serves travel updates to users all over the world. The traffic this database serves is very read heavy and can have some latency issues at certain time of the year. Which can you do to alleviate these latency issue? Add replicas. A gaming company is designed several new games. Is designing several new games which focus heavily on player game interaction. The player makes a certain move and the game has to react very quickly to change the environment based on that move and to represent the next decision for the player in real time. A tool is needed to continuously collect data about player game interaction and feed the data into the gaming platform in real time. Which AWS service can best meet this need? So it would be Kinesis Stream. So this needs to be analyzed as well, I guess. No, this does not need analysis. So we'll put the data in the stream, and based on the stream, we will read or feed it in the platform. A large big box hardware chain is setting up a new inventory management system. They have been developed a system using IoT sensors which captures the removal of item from the store shelves in real time and want to use this information to update the inventory system. The company wants to analyze this data in hope of being ahead of demand and properly managing logistics and delivery of in-demand items, which AWS service can be used to capture this data as close to real time as possible, which being able to both transform and load the stream data into Amazon S3 or Elasticsearch. I would go with Firehose. You have been assigned the review of the security in your company AWS cloud environment. You final your final deliverable will be a report dealing potential security issue. One of the first thing you need to describe is the responsibilities of the company under the shared responsibility module. What is customer's responsibility? So EC2 instance patching, OS patching. You have multiple EC2 instances housing application in VPC in a single availability zone. Your EC2 workload needs low latency network performance, high network throughput, and a tightly coupled node to node communication, which is the best measure you can do to ensure this throughput. Launch your instances in a clustered placement group. Your company has decided to migrate a SQS server database to a newly created AWS account. Which service can be used to migrate the database? TMS, which is Database Migration Service. We are close, guys, and we might be done probably half an hour before the actual time. You have been evaluating the NACLs in your company. Most of the NACLs are configured the same: 100 all traffic allow, 200 all traffic deny, star all traffic deny if a request comes in. How will this be evaluated? All default, the default will deny traffic. The request will be allowed. The highest number rule will be used. All rules will be evaluated and the end result will be denied. The request will be allowed because first rule says allow all, which is number 100. Second says deny. And third says if no rule is met, then deny. So there is a thing, if any traffic is denied in any of the rule, ultimately it is denied. I'm confused. Let's mark and let's say deny. Leave the comment in the answer what you think about the last question. An accounting company has big data application for analyzing actual data. The company is migrating some of its services to the cloud, and for the foreseeable future will be operating in a hybrid environment. They need a storage service that provides simple, scalable, fully managed elastic NFS file system for use with AWS cloud service and on-premise resource. Which AWS service can meet these requirements? EFS is Elastic File Service, and they have mentioned that here already. A consultant is hired by a small company to configure AWS environment. The consultant begin work with VPC and launching EC2 instance within the VPC. The initial instance will be placed in a public subnet. The consultant begin to create security group. The consultant has launched several instances, creating security group and has associated security group with instances. The consultant wants to change the security group of an instance, which statement is true. You can change the security group of an instance when the instance is in the pending or stop state. You cannot change the security group of an instance when it is running. You can change the security group of an instance when the instance is in running or stop mode state. A software company has created an application to capture service request from a user and also enhancement request. The application is deployed on an auto scaling group of EC2 instances fronted by an application load balancer. The auto scaling group has scaled to maximum capacity, but there are still requests being lost. The company has decided to use SQS with the auto scaling group to ensure all messages are saved and processed. What is an appropriate matrix for auto scaling with SQS? Okay, I have worked on SQS with auto scaling group. So SQS queue would get filled up, and then there will be a backlog which would be created. And what they are saying is they have application load balancer, and auto scaling group will max out. But on what criteria it will maximize or scale? So it can be done based on the backlog. If backlog is greater, backlog per user or per hour. There are two things. Since this is an application, they are talking about application load balancer. So application can detect the user. Let's go with this. You have just been hired by a large organization which uses many different AWS services in the environment. Some of the services which handle data include RDS, Redshift, Elastic Cache, DynamoDB, S3, and Glacier. You have been instructed to configure a web application using stateless web servers. Which service can you use to handle session state data? So you have session state data, DynamoDB, Elastic Cache. You suspect that one of the AWS service your company is using has gone down. How can you check the status of the service? Personal health board. An online media company has created an application which provides analytical data to its client. The application is hosted on EC2 instances and in an ASG. You have been brought on as a consultant and add an application load balancer front the auto scaling group and distribute the load between the instances. The VPC which houses this architecture is running IPv4 IPv6. The last thing you need to do to complete the configuration is point the domain name to the application load balancer using the Route 53 which record type at the zone apex will you use to point DNS name of the application load balancer. So I could do alias with the A records, right? Hmm. And then alias with a C name record set. You are working in a large healthcare facility which uses EBS volume on most of the EC2 instances. The CFO has approached you about cost saving and it has been decided that some of the EC2 instances and EBS volume would be deleted. What step can be taken to preserve the data on the EBS volume and keep the data available on short notice? Okay, so they are saying that some of the EC2 instances and EBS volume would be deleted. What step can be taken to preserve the data on EBS volume and keep the data available on short notice? So you can move them to Amazon S3, archive them to Glacier, store the data in cloud formation, take point in time snapshot of your Amazon EBS volumes. That would be expensive between Glacier and S3. So, because you need them on short notice. So, if you have the time to give notice, Glacier would be the option. Oh wow, we are already on last question and we have half an hour left. You have recently migrated your small company to AWS and are looking for some general best practice guidance within the platform. Which AWS service can help you optimize your AWS environment by giving recommendation to cost, reduce cost, increase security, and improve performance? Trusted advisor. So we can finish the challenge, but we can go to the questions for review. So let's go. This one, this is about the rule. So I believe this will deny the rule because one of the rules say deny everything, but that rule would be trumped by the allow rule. Still, we'll keep this 60 number backlog per user because we use application load balancer and I hope it can track the user. Otherwise, I would go with the per hour backlog. 47th, you can create. So right now we are reviewing before finishing the test because we have half an hour remaining already. You can create CloudWatch alarm that trigger when CPU utilization. So we picked this underutilized resource, how you can save money. This one is you have been assigned path-based routing or support a sticky session. So that's the primary difference between classic load balancer and application load balancer. That application load balancer allows path-based routing. This one you need to select network because you need low throughput. So that is why we picked this. So contractor needs temporary access. Best bet I could see here is if I go with SSO, I can do identity federation. IAM user can be created as well. So I would give them the user and then it can, user accounts can be deleted. Or we could go with SSO. Let's go with this instead of STS. Write a cron job. So this is same thing as stop the instance. Upon a certain status, stop the instance. That is what we did. But we could always come up with this option here again. 27 import export. We were trying to take the dump of the DynamoDB. Import export 24. You can read from red replica. Yeah, this we already saw. You can have 5 read replicas. That is true per master, each with its own DNS endpoint. I think this is more appropriate. So let us change this as well. We'll see, don't worry. Because I was thinking it will automatically fail over to the read replica, but I'm not sure. We might have to manually do it as well. So I'm taking a risk here. So 24, 16 number, AWS Ops works because they want to run the Puppet. There was a confusion between multi-site and warm standby. Since this is active, we picked we are gone with the multi-site. You can have 2 instances. This is a limit. Star specify that uh, if it doesn't meet any rule, it would go with the default thing. So we will go with ninth one, cost-effective private connection that bypass the internet. So they are talking about direct connect, VPN and direct connect. Direct connect has a dedicated network. Yeah, this one should be good. You can delete this group or you can change the group rules. Reserved, yes. So we are talking about live uh, create a CloudWatch event for upload on S3. Again, reread. You are managing S3 bucket in an organization. The extend to Amazon Glacier for auditing purpose. You would like to be informed if an object is restored, what you would do. I think CloudWatch can do that. So better is to use CloudWatch. there would be create a CloudWatch event for uploads to S3. But the confusion is we are not talking about uploads, we are talking about restoration. Same confusion still. And the first one is managing web sessions, storing metadata. These are the two main use case of DynamoDB. So what do you say? Should we submit? What do you say? Are we going to pass? So I think 70% is the passing mark, or 80. I guess 70. So 3, 2, 1, just a moment. How much would be 30% wrong means? So let's say 65, 6, 6 1 is 6, 6 2 is 12, 6 3 is 18. So we can get 20 wrongs and still we would pass. So I guess we'll pass. 3, 2, 1. So guys, we passed. Congratulations. But there are several wrong answers. So I will quickly review these wrong and then we'll finish the session. Fourth, AWS import export, there is nothing like that. There is map reduce. So this question is related to the gaming application for restore and backup. So I'll move quickly to the next one, which is, backlog per instance. We picked per user. So this is the question where we use SQS and then AWS. I'll go with this uh, because if I'll read it, it will take time. Alias with CNAME record. Oops. So I had to pick triple A. That was close. And then 14th, use launch template instead. So what I say, simply create the needed version. Launch config already have this versioning. Yes, it has. Incorrect. Launch configuration do not have a versioning template. Oops. I have used that. I created a copy of it actually. So that's not the exact version wherein I can roll back. So my apologies, I misguided in here. Use launch template instead. And cloud formation is what you need to do if you have to control the deployment. Hmm. Opworks does not provide template like cloud formation, and that can be version controlled. And while it does offer some granular control, it does not have the level of control offered by cloud formation. Okay, thank you. There is a vCPU based on-demand instance per limit per region. Okay. 32. The instance launched from the older. Oops, this is a bummer. The instance launched from the oldest launch configuration. The instance of which the load balancer stopped sending traffic. Incorrect. The instance from the oldest launch configuration. So this question is there is a load balancer in front, and when the load is needed to be scaled in, which one would be killed first? So the instance launched from the oldest launch config. Okay. And if everything has the same launch configuration, then this is a question to you. Search, please search it and leave it in the comment. Mm, add read replica to offload some read traffic. Convert to Aurora to allow the standby to serve read traffic. Add read replica to offload some read traffic. Because it was disaster recovery, that is why we picked Aurora. But then Okay, 36 instance is rebooted. So incorrect. The data of an instance stored persists only during the lifetime of its associated instance. When you reboot, some Amazon EC2 instance type come with a form of direct attached block storage known as instance store. The instance store is ideal for temporary storage because the data stored in the store volume is not persist through the instance stops, terminates, or hardware failure. So ultimately, they are saying that when you restart the instance, let me check something real quick. So in EC2 instances, I don't have an instance ready. Otherwise, I would have searched that in the instance you have different settings. If you stop and terminate, at least those are two actions. Okay, no worries. So now we have a lot of wrongs here. Configure S3 notification for restore operation from Glacier. Okay, this is the good answer actually what they have given. You cannot delete this group, however, you can change. Really? So you hired a small company to configure AWS. The consultant working with begins working with vCPU. The initial instance will be placed in a public subnet. The consultant begin to create security group. What is true with the security default group? You cannot delete the default group. However, you can change. Okay, this is a good learning for the final exam. Oops, we picked STS at the last review time. We changed it to SSO. And I know I told you guys that this is single sign-on. No worries. The request will be allowed. Why it will be allowed? Rules are evaluated starting with the lower number. So lowest number was 100, all traffic allowed. And then it got denied. Rules are evaluated starting the lowest number. As soon as a rule matches traffic, it's applied immediately regardless of a higher numbered rule that may contradict it. The following are the basic things that you need to know about the ACL. Your VPC automatically comes with a modified default network ACL. By default, it allows all inbound rule and outbound traffic. If applicable IPv6, you cannot create a custom network ACL and associate it with a subnet. Okay, this is very long to read. You guys can take a screenshot or pause here and read it. 56. It provides cost-effective private network connection that bypass the internet. It provides a connection between on-premise network and VPC using a secure and private connection with IP. I told you guys we had these two options listed out. And it says direct connect bypass the internet, and then here they are talking about direct connect. That is why I picked up this one. VPN does not bypass the internet, okay, but direct connect does. Maybe would read more, listen more, think more before answering. And then the last is this one. Take a point in time. Man, this will be more expensive. Let's see. The data first has to go to S3 before being archived to Glacier, and it takes time to retrieve data from Glacier. So you can back up the data on AWS EBS volume to Amazon S3 by taking point in time snapshots. Snapshots are incremental backup, which means that only blocks the device has changed, they get saved. This minimizes the time required to create snapshots and saves on storage cost by not duplicating the data. When you delete a snapshot, only the data unique to that snapshot is removed. Each snapshot contains all the information that is needed to restore your data from the moment when the snapshot was taken. Okay, so yeah, thanks for watching. And this is a 2 hour long video. And if you have watched all this, you're a hard worker, basically, which means you're serious for your exam. That's why you have been till the end of this video. And for me also, I've been speaking non-stop for 2 hours. So at least please give encouragement or a feedback as the comment in the video. And I will upload more prep exams on the playlist. So if you will go to the description, you will find a list playlist which has more such exams. So I would request be prepared before appearing in the exam. These tests are like these show up in the exam. So when you will go through these, there is a very great chance that you will pass the exam. So thanks and best of luck for your AWS Solutions Certified Architect certification. My name is Prem Aseem Jain. See you in the next video. Bye and take care.